Hello to all the HubLE audience. My name is Jonathan Gustafson. I am a postdoc research fellow at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, and I am also co-chair of the Meet the First Author Committee at HubLE. I'm here today for an edition of Meet the First Author with Mr. Hoon Kim from Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the US. And we will be talking about his paper entitled Simulated Anterior Translation and Medial Rotation of the Talus Affect Ankle Joint Contact Forces During Vertical Hopping, which was published in Computer Methods in Biomechanics and Biomedical Engineering. Hoon, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to start off with is, could you give us a little summary of your work and how it fits into the big picture of the ankle joint within the field?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I can start with the question. So have you ever sprained your ankle?
Absolutely, for sure. So I play a lot of sports. I've played a lot of sports all my life, and I play a lot of volleyball now. I still play professional beach volleyball, and ankle injuries are the worst.
Yeah, so yeah, as you know, one of the most common musculoskeletal injury is ankle sprain. So many people got ankle sprain, but many people do not get proper treatment at the time of ankle sprain. So that's the bad news in the ankle joint. So in that case, ankle joint can go to a chronic symptomatic condition, which is called chronic ankle instability.
Okay.
So people with chronic ankle instability have many mechanical and functional deficits. So one of the well-known mechanical deficit is ankle joint malalignment, and many researchers assumed that malalignment in the ankle joint can increase a risk factor of ankle osteoarthritis. So this is important thing because up to 80% of people with ankle instability develop ankle osteoarthritis.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it seems like we could find the relationship between ankle joint malalignment and ankle joint contact force, but we couldn't find it. So we thought one problem is that it is difficult to measure ankle joint contact force in using experimental study design. So one possible way is to use simulation with computational modeling. So in this study, we used the computational modeling and the muscle-driven simulation to identify a common malalignment, such as anterior translation and medial rotation of the talus on the ankle joint contact force during vertical hopping in 10 athletes.
Okay, so you guys had basically 10 athletes that you recruited at Marquette to kind of collect some motion data for, and then you use that to drive some of your simulations. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So
I was
yep.
No, I was just no, you're good. I was gonna say something that we talked about a little bit before this was what I found interesting is tell me a little bit just about your background, right? So you're not actually an engineer or computer programmer by training, right?
Yep. So I'm an athletic trainer, certified athletic trainer. I studied in South Korea for undergraduate program, majored in sports medicine, and then I went to Nebraska to study athletic training. So at Omaha, and then I wanted to be a athletic trainer actually, but my interest was changed to research side. So I went to Marquette University to study biomechanics. So at the beginning of my PhD program, I didn't know I didn't know the name of MATLAB and any muscle mechanics, any simulation concept.
And I think that's so interesting, right? So now we're talking about a study that is very simulation heavy and simulation based, and you've really had to learn a lot and kind of jump into that field. So kind of jumping back to the article. So can you tell us a little bit? I think I'm going to pull up here this this PowerPoint presentation that you sent me so that we can kind of talk about the avenue and the methods for your research. So tell me a little bit about the methods that you employed. So you said it was a muscle-driven model, right?
Yeah. So in order to mimic the talus malalignment in the ankle joint, we took a genetic model in the OpenSim software, which is open source, and then we manipulated the ankle joint by opening degree of freedom in the ankle joint, such as anteroposterior direction of talus and the medial lateral rotation of the talus.
Okay.
Then we created 15 cases of anterior translation and another 15 cases of medial rotation of the talus. Then we combined the 15 by 15 to create 225 simulated talus position.
Okay.
Then we continue to calculate joint angle using inverse kinematics, and then to better simulate the dynamics, we use the residual reduction algorithm, and we use the computed muscle control to estimate individual muscle forces. Then finally, we could get ankle joint contact force in 3 directions using joint reaction analysis.
Okay, perfect. So this is kind of your one standard way of being able to go about and calculate some of the joint contact forces, right? And as you were saying, because of experimental limitations, this is really one of the good ways to be able to try and get estimates of the changes in joint contact forces. So you basically were artificially creating this malalignment and this malpositioning or altered kinematics, right, within the talus, and then seeing how that changed the ankle joint contact forces.
Yes.
So let's talk about the major findings you had here. So you've got these plots down here.
Yeah, it's very colorful plots. So yeah, we have 3 plots in the figure line, and when you look at the first one, the title is anteroposterior ankle joint contact force, and as you can see, the color pattern, the yellow represent is a greater ankle joint contact force, and the blue color represents a smaller amount of ankle joint contact force. And the y-axis, vertical axis, is rotation of medial rotation of the talus, and the horizontal changes is anterior translation of the talus in the ankle joint. So when you see the first one, the color pattern is changing horizontally. So that means the ankle joint contact force in anterior-posterior direction was more affected by the anterior translation of talus than medial rotation of the talus.
Okay. Yep. And then if we come to the second plot here.
Yeah, so vertical ankle joint contact force, which is compressive contact force, was affected by both medial rotation of the talus and anterior translation of the talus because the color is changing diagonal. But as you can see, the R squared value, 0.11, is small value, so the impact was small.
Okay.
While the medial lateral ankle joint contact force in the third plot, as you can see, the color changing is vertically. That means medial lateral ankle joint contact force was more affected by medial rotation of the talus than the anterior translation of the talus. And the R squared value was higher than any other direction of ankle joint contact force.
So you were able to show here with this modeling technique that essentially any of these changes and these malpositioning of the talus does lead to altered joint contact forces. So can you tell us a little bit about what do these findings mean in the big picture?
Yes, so we confirmed the malalignment in the ankle joint can affect or can increase a risk factor of ankle osteoarthritis, such as ankle joint contact force. That means we have two clinical implications. One is examination of talus position is important. So when you have a patient with chronic ankle instability, we may want to avoid development of ankle osteoarthritis. So we should examine the talus position using some techniques such as X-ray or fluoroscopy, and then if they have malalignment in the ankle joint, the next step would be management. So we can try to restore talus alignment using some techniques, validated techniques, So one is taping techniques during dynamic motion for athletes, or even in daily life people. So, and then another way is mobilization technique. So we can use those techniques to avoid development of ankle osteoarthritis in people with chronic ankle instability. That's the clinical implications.
That's excellent. So with the modeling technique, I think what's great as well is that you can try and implement some of these different strategies you just discussed, right? The taping techniques or some of the bracing techniques to try and improve the ankle instability and see if there's any changes in the kinematics. And if you've reduced it or maybe brought it to a place that's more stable, as your model has shown, that would lead to less, reduced contact forces within the ankle joint. So that's really great. So what can you tell a little bit about your experience publishing in computer methods in biomechanics and biomedical engineering?
Yeah, this publication was my second paper as an first author. So if I compare the first one to this publication, it took longer time, but our editor was changed to another person at that time.
Okay.
So transitioning time takes a little bit more. So after transitioning time, the process was very smooth. For example, we communicated with new editor to ask how it goes, and then the response was very quick, and the reviewers' comments were critical and important, so we could add something more important things in paper. So it was great.
That's perfect. Well, that sounds like a really great experience, and I'm happy to hear that you were able to get that, have that positive experience. And now, in terms of your future career and your goals, right? So, how does this publication help you kind of achieve some of those goals?
So that's a good question. So because I'm an athletic trainer, so clinical professional, and also I'm a researcher. So I wanted to be a bridge person between clinical setting and research setting. So in other words, my long-term goal is to better understand the neuromuscular characteristics in musculoskeletal injuries, or even neurologic pathology with combining simulation method and experimental study design too. So this publication helped me a lot in terms of thinking process. So it accelerated my thinking process to come up with how I combine simulation and experimental study design. So for example, it actually occurs right now because I am doing my PhD dissertation, and two aims of my dissertation are already combining simulation and experimental data. So
that's excellent.
Yeah, so it's a good opportunity.
That's great. Well, I definitely wish you best of luck as you're finishing your PhD. I know that it can be a little bit of a challenge to get through that last hump, but it sounds like you're really on the right path. It sounds like you have a really great team around you, and we're so happy that you could join us here at HubLE to be able to talk about your study, and we definitely look forward to hopefully seeing some more papers from you as you finish your PhD.
Yeah,
Very
you.
exciting. So, is the next step for you then postdoc? Do you think you're going to go to the clinic? What are your thoughts?
Um, so hopefully I can get a job to continue to work on my research. Especially I want to expanding my skill set to understand other musculoskeletal injury too. So for example, knee injury or upper body, because I've never experienced the research about upper body biomechanics.
Sure.
And like a knee joint or hip joint. So I want to expand my skill set to other musculoskeletal injuries, or even neurologic pathology too. So I'm interested in any position where I can combine simulation work in other musculoskeletal injury or neurologic pathologies.
Well, that sounds great. So everybody
Yep.
out there in the HubLE community, if you're definitely looking for an
Yep.
excellent researcher who comes with a lot of clinical experience, I think that's you've got a good person here in Hoon. Well, thank you so much.